jam something on that screen, or I'm screwed. I move the power cord for this. That's back here. Yay. I need to hold it. I don't know how long this battery will last. Find a multi-plug or a switch or something to plug it into. We have 10 minutes now. I needed more stress. That's absolutely what I needed, was more stress. Can't think of anything that would make my life more fun than more stress at this particular moment in time. This thing's been working for an hour and a half to make a 45-minute video. It is nothing but 2 clips back to back to back to back to back to back to back. That's it. That's all it was supposed to do. Now I have to stop it. Maybe it'll run in the background. I doubt it. I have to unplug this, plug that in. So screwing up my day, screwing up my day, screwing up my day. One more thing to screwing up my day. It's awesome. What was that? Can you turn off the overhead light, please? Can you come play with this projector and try to get it centered while I try to find the artwork, please? Let me guess, it's not going to play over and over again. yesterday, and I had to write all the slides, and I don't have time to do all this again and again and again. Don't tell me Keynote doesn't exist on this end. For books to different sizes. Then I'm gonna do it.
Should be the same size.
They are not the same size. They're not even close. It's not about the book. It's about the position. Why did you tighten your foot back down?
I didn't.
Okay. It's the least amount of shit I can make it look like. That little box is never gonna go away. Oh my gosh. Have to do that in the projector.
That's what I thought, but I don't know how.
And I can't see it for that light on the other side.
Go,
Karen, stop. They were the one that has a little picture of the direction of the projector.
is the meeting ID the same?
As what? Karen, don't touch that. Go log into the Zoom on the.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Karen, open Zoom and log into the meeting. You're talking about the meeting ID for this meeting. No, you're gonna have to text that to yourself. This one right here. Start.
Recording in progress.
More people enter the way.
I'm mic'd up and standing in front of the camera, yes. It should be muted from the production board, Karen, because it's live streaming. They can hear everything that's live streaming. Can everybody hear me okay? Give me 2 thumbs up if you can. We've had a little bit of technical difficulties. We've never used our studio like this before. So forgive me for the delays.
Big echo right now.
Okay, let me see if I can cut down on that echo. Is that better? Not yet. That's what's supposed to be on the mic. There shouldn't be anything else on the mic, though. Is that better? That got rid of the echo?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay. How about that? I moved my Bluetooth receiver that I hear you through away. Is that better?
Yes, that's better.
Very good. Okay, Cameron, you can go live on me, Karen, in the studio. We have loads of fun with putting this whole project together. This is my first webinar. I told one of my mentors, hey, this is going to be like the very first kiss on the very first date when you're in middle school, because it's going to be sloppy and unknown, and there's a whole lot of figuring out to do that I haven't figured out yet. So I'm glad that you guys are here and that you trusted me to be a part of this. I also hope that you get everything you're looking for and then some out of this event. We are live streaming it on social media platforms, so not everybody can see you. They can only see me on the live. Those that are going to be doing questions and answers with me through the course of this event are only those in the Zoom room. So everybody else will be able to hear me and see me. They don't even know who you are. So on the social media side, if you're out there in social media land and you would like to get to be a part of this, you need to jump over to the website and register so that Karen can add you to the Zoom and you can be a part of this. Otherwise, you can just observe from a distance. So I want to say thanks to all of you who are being here. First, I'm Loren Norris with StoryPower Academy, and my purpose for doing this webinar is really to help you understand better what we do at StoryPower Academy. Now, the concept of story creation mastery is a really big deal when it comes to communicating and leading. And what I find is a lot of people have the same barrier when it comes to stories. They feel like, I don't have that skill set, I don't have that expertise, and therefore anything that I do in this, I'm just going to make myself look more embarrassed or less professional or less expert. Or they feel like, I got so much to say, telling a single story is absolutely ridiculous. How many of you, just raise your hand if you would say, I think my story is so important I need to tell the whole thing. Nobody believes that? Well, I think it's true. And I think from a testimonial standpoint, it is true for people to be able to say, this is who I am, and this is what I do, and this is how I show up in the world. People want to know a little bit about your background. And you want them to know who you are before they do business with you, or they trust you to lead them or to minister to them. And the challenge that a lot of us have is we don't know what part of that story to tell. So part of what I want to talk about today is, the 3 things that my clients demand of me are this. They want influence, they want impact, and ultimately they want income. Now, that income may be a stream of revenue for their salary, their paycheck. It may be the fundraising that they're going to do or the raising of a new project. Some of my clients are involved in politics. Some of my clients are involved in ministry and nonprofits. Some of my clients are running their own business. And they've come out of a career where they've had a very stable 6 or more figure income. And now all of a sudden they're out on their own and they're thinking, I don't have that multi-million-dollar marketing budget anymore, but I still got to generate revenue. I don't have the support of a team of 45 people. My bride and I are doing this by ourselves today. So where does the camera go? What angle are we supposed to have for this? And where does that cable go to get that feed into there? I get it. I know what it's like to launch a small business and try to keep it going and follow all the new trends. It's not easy. But the other thing that people are looking for when they come to me for help with storytelling is the ability to influence others. Sometimes what you're looking for in the ability to influence others is actually, how do you persuade them
to change their mind, to involve themselves in new ideas, to take their ideas to the marketplace in a way that other people buy into them and go, yeah, that's important to me too. And that's a challenge for a lot of us, because we feel like if I have new ideas that are maybe a little controversial, maybe they're a little bit, I don't know, challenging, we've got to figure out how do we convey those ideas to other people. And then, of course, impact is the hardest one for many of us, and that is, how do I influence people to make new decisions? How do I generate income? And right in the intersection of that is the impact that we're going to make on our world and the world around us. Influence, well, that's leadership. John Maxwell says leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. I think that's a very powerful statement, and I believe it's true. I also know there are a lot of people who look at influence like we look at TikTok. How many of you would say that TikTok is a world full of influencers? What if I said, I don't believe they're influencers, I believe they're attention hounds? How many people have you seen on TikTok, Facebook, whatever social media you follow, and in all honesty, the value of the content they produce is no more than a clown on a unicycle? I mean, they can get up there and make people look, and it's like that old 80s thing, ha, made you look, right? It's really just about getting you to look. It's not about persuading you. It's not about changing your mind. Maybe while you're watching, they also throw a little subject matter in there to get you to buy a product or shave a new way or try a new diet. But generally, it's just entertainment. It's just candy, cotton candy for the brain. So when we talk about impact, we're somewhere between, can I get your attention long enough to get your money, whether it's ad dollars just from the views of the video itself, or it's ad dollars from the product that's sold. A lot of people do Amazon. They're resellers of products and services that maybe they do or don't believe in. They didn't manufacture them. They didn't create them. So their revenue, their income is driven by attention, not so much by influence. Impact is that spot between, where you're actually pushing against the ideologies. You're challenging the way people think. You're bringing about transformation in their life. And so influence, impact, and income are the things that my clients, when they come to me and say, I want your help, that's what most of them are looking for. Now, the number one problem that parents, professionals, preachers, and politicians have in common, I believe it can be solved in 3 easy steps. And I'm going to share those 3 easy steps with you today. First, I want to tell you how I came to the conclusion that this is true. I walked into the little boy's bathroom in the middle school where I went to middle school. And I found my mom on her knees, face buried in the urinal. And I said, Mom, what are you doing? I mean, we're supposed to be going to dinner. And she said, well, I got to finish this bathroom and the one on the west wing and the one down the hall before I can go. And I said, well, Mom, why are you doing that? And she said, son, you know, I dropped out of high school. This is the best I'll ever do. How many of you have had a story in your head that just keeps replaying, that maybe it sounds like an excuse, maybe it sounds like a decision that you've already made, maybe it sounds like a series of decisions that you've already made, and you just keep telling that story over and over again, not realizing it is the nemesis of your success. My mother repeated that story so many times for so many years. It became the thing that changed her opportunity to find a better station in life. Now, after that conversation was over, we ended up not having dinner. The Air Force sent me off to Honduras for 6 months. And while I was gone, my aunt called me at work. Now, my aunt had never called me at work before that day, has never called me at work since that day. But on that day, she called me on the phone in Honduras. And I ran all the way from the housing out to the edge of the base to get to a cell phone or to a payphone. I picked up the payphone. When they connected me, she said, you know, that conversation you had with your mom, it really broke her heart. And I'm thinking, I'm 3,000 miles away from home. You can't just tell me my mom's in trouble and it's my fault and I can't get there fast enough to do anything about it. And so my heart kind of skipped a beat for a moment. I took a deep breath and she said, because of that conversation, your mom and I both decided to go back to high school and get our GEDs. And I was like, yes. In her next breath, my aunt said, but when your mom got through the course, they told her that they weren't going to let her get her GED. I'm like, what? She said, yeah, the continuing education leader, he was a part of the faculty of the school, adult education teacher, whatever you want to call him, said, your grades are so high, your scores are so good. I would really love to see you go on and get your high school diploma and then maybe even go back to college. And I thought, well, that's interesting. He said, if you'll do that, I'll see what we can do for scholarships towards your teaching certificate, and I'll ask the superintendent about bridging all the years you were a lunch lady and a custodian towards your teacher's retirement. Well, that's pretty impressive. And that's what she did. And the same month that my mom turned 50, she graduated from Mary Hardin Baylor with a degree in education and a double minor in sociology and psychology. And she helped these kids that had already been abandoned by the school. They'd already been kicked out. They'd already been told, we got no space for you. And after leading the Challenger High School for almost 15 years, she helped these kids graduate. Now, one of those students went on to ROTC and into the Marine Corps. Another of those students, when she was 15, she showed up at the school pregnant. Parents were on drugs. She was always in trouble, always truant, and the school wrote her off. At 17, she came back and she's like, look, my dad's in jail, or my mom's in jail, and my dad is gone because of my mom, and now it's just me and the baby, and I got no education, and that's no future for my daughter. And the school said, honey, we wrote you off 2 years ago. We're done. We don't owe you anything. And she said, yeah, but in the state of Texas, you have compulsory attendance laws, and until I turn 18, you have to educate me. And they're like, we don't have a space for you with a baby, and we don't have childcare. And my little 5'2" nothing mom stood up in the back and said, I got room in the Challenger High School. We can put that bassinet right in the classroom, and I will help with that baby so that she can graduate. And that young lady graduated from high school and went on to be the director of nursing in Georgetown. Now, the truth of that story is that my mom never knew that the story she told in her head is what stopped her success in life. And it took someone challenging the story she told in her head to say, that's not helping you, to change the trajectory of her own life and move her into a place where she could be more powerful in impacting other people's lives. And the way she did that was for 15 years, she changed their story. My job is to pick up the mantle. StoryPower Academy is about helping people change the story that's in their head. Or let me say it another way, changing the story that you tell in the mirror until you can tell that same story in the media. If you've ever been asked to be on a podcast and you thought to yourself, well, if I was a guest on a podcast, I don't even know what I would say. Or if I was a guest on a podcast, I hope they've got a long time because I've got a long story to tell. Or if I'm a guest on a podcast, you know, I'm going to take over the conversation pretty quickly. All of those are challenges for the listening audience. Type me if you agree with that statement. See, one of the challenges we have when it comes to communicating with those people outside our circle is figuring out what's important for them to hear. I want to tell you about one of my clients. He barely got out of high school and later came to me and said, I have this opportunity to speak at an event where I'll be sharing the stage with a nationally known, perhaps internationally known celebrity. It's going to be at a big football stadium. There's going to be 700 to 1,000 people in the audience. And I don't want to get on the stage and feel like I don't know what I'm talking about or feel like I'm fumbling my way through. I want to nail the content that I'm delivering. Now, this was his event. He had paid for the stadium. He had paid to bring in this celebrity speaker. He had brought all the people together and had been marketing this thing and spending oodles and gobs of dollars on it. He said, I don't want to be on the stage talking about this subject that is so important to me and feel like I'm the detractor in the room. So we worked together for about 5 months. We went through every element of his content, everything that he wanted to present and produce, every little, theatrics that he wanted to include in the show, because there were times he'd be on stage and then he'd come down and somebody else would come up. And that rotation meant I've got to be brief and I've got to be poignant in the time that I have to be on the stage. Well, you've also got to be a great communicator, because if you bring this superstar up here from the NBA and you bring this superstar up here from the NFL, and you're the wedge between them, if you can't perform at the same level, if you don't have interesting stories to say, if you can't get your ideas across, if you can't impact people to make a transformation in their life, then these two entertainers are going to do it, and you're going to be the bomb of the show. And so we worked for several months on that, and we were able to pull that off. And there were a lot of people that came after that event and said, honestly, you were kind of the superstar of the show. I mean, I know you had all these other celebrities. I'm glad they were there, but you really changed the way I look at this topic. Ironically, his topic was tithing. How many of you would like to be able to do a presentation on tithing in a large public venue alongside NBA, NFL speakers? That is a hard task to follow. Now, how was he able to do that? What we spent our time on, and these are the 3 steps that I want to get these in your head. So if you're taking notes, I want you to write down the 3 brief descriptions of these 3 steps. The first is select the best story. The second is qualify each story. And the third is craft those stories. Now, in the case of this particular event, it wasn't just selecting a great story, because we can all look back at our life and go, how many stories do I have? I'm just going to pick the most impactful ones or the best ones. But in this particular case, it was a story that was connected to the idea that he wanted to express. Then he had to qualify that story by comparing it against an expert framework, which the StoryPower Grid is a very elaborate framework that says, does it have context? Does it have content? Does it have credibility? Does it have credential? And all of these are things that they become like the cheese grater, if you will. When you lay them down over the top of your story, they really push you to ask those tougher questions about your story. And then finally, you've got to craft those stories diligently for time, because you have an allotted speaking slot, or you have an allotted time of someone's attention. I don't know if you know this or not, but the average strong video on a social media platform will get the first 3 seconds you can get and keep their attention. After the first 3 seconds, if you don't have their attention, they're going to wander off. And even if you keep their attention, the odds that they're going to stay and participate in what you're doing past the 15 seconds, that's a hard ask as well. So you've got 3 to 15 seconds to make sure those stories really draw people in to go, that's something I want to hear, and it matters to me, and it's important to me, and I think you have the credibility to make it change my life. So that's part of what we want to be able to do when we're selecting and crafting these stories. So for this particular, I need to have influence, me as a nobody, alongside NFL and NBA players who already have the name ID and the brand ID and everybody knows what to expect from them. I've got to be able to step up to the plate and deliver at the same level. A very specific path that we went through to evaluate every one of those stories. Next, we can talk about income. Remember, I told you that one of the 3 things that my clients demand of me is income. And when I say income, what I mean is these are people who are looking at the overall presentation and going, how can I gain ROI from storytelling? So I had a particular nonprofit leader who came to me, and the first time we worked together, and you can ask Karen about this, she sat down with me to have dinner and tell me the story of her nonprofit and her organization and her life and how she got to this point and what caused her to make the change in her life. And she told me straight up, it took 9 hours. 9 hours for her to tell me the story. How many of you would have stayed for 9 hours? I don't see anybody's hand up. How many of you, if you were considering writing a check to that nonprofit, would have said, oh yes, please, regale me for 9 hours with your entire life story? Most people are not going to dive into that. But over a period of years that we worked together, the first several months that we worked together, she took what was a $30,000 average fundraise when she did an annual banquet. The next one, she raised $130,000. We rewrote her speech and crafted it down to 27 minutes. The 27-minute speech still took her 45 minutes because she kept embellishing and adding things back to it. And that one raised $130,000 instead of $30,000. That's pretty good progress, wouldn't you say? That's like a 4X. We're now 12 years into our relationship together, and her latest event was September of 2025. We've worked really diligently to get her responses to questions on podcast and interviews narrowed down to a 2 to 3 minute answer. And for this particular banquet, she was on and off the stage between people, very much like our NBA, NFL speaker and the guy in the middle. And so she had a lot of celebrities and a lot of people who had been recipients of the great things her nonprofit does. And she has whittled down to 2 to 3 minutes each individual story of success that her organization has accomplished. And in that 3-minute window, an ask. It's a brief ask. It's not a please pull out your checkbooks, I'm going to wait until everybody has brought me a check. It's if you can see the value of this, join us, participate, and help. And that event in September raised $300,000. So it's taken 12 years to get us from a 9-hour speech to a series of 2-minute talks. But she has elevated a lot more than that. So if we're looking at the same framework, select the stories. These stories were selected based on the decision she wanted them to make. So if you're still taking notes, I'd go back to that first one, the first step in the framework is select the stories. But now we're selecting the stories for the decision you want them to make, meaning they've heard what you had to say about this idea. They want to know, is this story relevant to me? Does it resonate with me emotionally so that when you get to the call to action, I go, that's something I need to do for sure. Now, to qualify each story, in this particular instance, the highest level of expectation for the people in that room that are being asked to pull out their checkbook, it's, do you have the content? Meaning, does the story you're about to tell me explain to me what your organization does? Can you put it in the context of our relationship? I'm a donor, I'm a volunteer, I'm a service provider, I'm going to bring toys, goods, clothes, et cetera, et cetera. How does that story directly relate to me? So is it an entertaining story? Is it contextualized against our relationship? Is it explaining your credentials? When I hear this story, do I trust that you know what you're doing? That you can actually do what you claim you can do? Now, credentials and credibility are a little bit different, right? So this particular client happens to be a retired RN. So when she says, I take care of the homeless, you know she does that in a way that is medically responsible, health responsible, society responsible, culturally responsible, et cetera, because that's her background. But just because she has the RN at the end of her name doesn't mean she's actually been doing it that way all along. And so part of this story also has to possess a little bit of credibility. And some of the stories we've worked on talk like one of her clients, if you will, one of the homeless that she's taking good care of, she provided coats for. And she said the reason we started providing coats was way back when, in the early part of our ministry, we actually had a guy come in, he was crying, he was weeping with tears, and he's like, I just watched my best friend scraped off the sidewalk with a shovel because he died and froze to death. He froze to the concrete because he had no blanket and no warm clothing and couldn't keep himself safe. Now, credibility says we don't just give out blankets. Karen, will you plug in that laptop? We don't just give out blankets because blankets are a good thing to hand out. We don't just give out blankets because it looks good on the scene, so to speak. We hand out blankets because they're life-saving devices. Another one of the stories that she uses regularly in that relationship is she talks about those people that they buy toys for their kids. And maybe you know folks like this. They buy toys for their kids at Christmas, but then they're so far behind financially paying back the credit card bill, et cetera, they don't realize that just because they bought toys for their kids, now they're going to be late on their mortgage. And now they can't pay their electric bill. And so, yeah, their kids have a great Christmas, but then they get evicted by February, or they're living in the cold by the middle of the January, February freeze. And they're doing it because the parents thought they were doing a good thing. Well, this organization provides toys for these kids, so these kids are not being left without Christmas, and the parents are not being left without a home or a warm place to sleep. When you can add a single sentence like that into your story, you have credibility. We're not just doing a good thing because it's a good thing. We're doing a good thing because it's the right thing to do, and it carries a lot of weight with the society. Finally, you've got to craft those stories in this very limited window of time to emotionally move people so that they'll take the recommended action. So you're not just crafting a story for entertainment's sake. You're not just crafting a story to get people to, ooh, made you look like a clown on a unicycle. You're crafting these stories in such a way that they have a heartfelt response to the things that you've said. The fun part of that is as we craft these stories, we get more emotionally involved in them. How many of you have told a story and when you tell that story, it makes you cry? Nobody? I see all these people with their cameras off. It's hard for me to know exactly what they're thinking. But if you're one of those people that tells a story and you get emotionally involved in the story that you're telling, I don't discourage that. I encourage you to be real and honest and authentic and human about your story. I've had clients that use AI to build the stories of their book. And when I go back and read them, I realize the end ask, when you've built this relationship with your client, the end ask is that you're expecting people to invest anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 in the services you provide. But you have this story that, although it's well crafted, it's got great rise and fall and emotion and character and scenes and everything. When I read the story the first time, I turned to my client and I said, when you were sitting on that bench where you met that person and you were looking off over the lake, were you at that bench where the Capitol building is on the right and all the trees are on the left and you can like see forever across the water? And my client looked back and said, I've actually never been there on that bench. That entire story was written by AI. And I thought, I wonder if that builds credibility with your audience or if that builds distrust. Because if I was about to spend $20,000 with you, I might ask that question myself. Hey, I sat on the bench before. Did you see all the way across the lake or was it too foggy that day? And if you've never been there, now all of a sudden I question everything else that you say. So it's not just about crafting a story that's entertaining. It's not just about crafting the story that, got your attention like a clown on a unicycle. It's about crafting a story that helps people to know and understand who you are and then deliver it in a way that people are emotionally attached to that story and to you. My retired RN, we talk about that contrast between influence and income, that middle road being impact. When we started working together 12 years ago, there were people who said, and I mean people of heavy weight, mayors in Dallas, leaders of international organizations who are the president of these organizations. I remember hearing the president of the NLRB one time say of this particular client, it's almost like she has a direct connection to heaven because whatever she wants, she tells heaven, then she tells you, and it's like you have this conviction to give her whatever she wants. It doesn't matter what she's asking for. Chairs, a free ballroom that's normally $50 grand, delivery of food or goods or toys or whatever she asks for, you give it to her. It doesn't make any sense. It just happens. And so there were a lot of people that knew her as the one that took care of the homeless, but boy, if she showed up, you better be ready to give because she's going to ask you to give something, to sacrifice something, to be involved somewhere. And here's the real irony. In all the years that I've worked with her, there's one particular story that she shares of why she absolutely hates the homeless. She serves 5,000 homeless people every Christmas. She travels around the world taking care of kids who have no shoes and no blankets and backpacks. And she grew up most of her life hating the homeless because in one of these stories, she talks about sitting in her kitchen chair, eating her breakfast with her mother, and her mother invited a homeless woman in to have breakfast with them. And this homeless woman came in and slapped her in her face for sitting in her seat. I can imagine I would not have a great fond affection for the homeless either. But if that's who you're called to serve, that's who you're called to serve. So here we are almost 15 years later, and I get a phone call from this same client, and she says, I don't have a fundraiser coming up for a while, but I did get an invitation, and I really think I need your help on this invitation. Now, I want to shift gears with you, because now we're talking about impact, not just influence and income. Those are very important, but impact is a different thing. I have clients who are politicians. I've been working with a mayor who will probably be back here in my studio in January, who travels internationally. He's been working in Nigeria for 16 years. And part of what he's involved in right now has got the attention of the United Nations and of the U.S. government because of the genocide taking place in Nigeria that is being denied by a lot of the political leaders in Nigeria. And as a mayor of a small town in Texas, in South Texas, everybody's like, why does he even care? Well, because he's been there firsthand. He's met the people who are the victims of this genocide, and he has a heart for them. He wants to make an impact for them. So when my client who serves the homeless gets the phone call, they said, hey, we would love for you to come to Dubai and be one of our keynote speakers for the Global Leadership Summit. Now, how many of you know what the Global Leadership Summit is? That is a big deal. Craig Groeschel, it was Bill Hybels before that. This is a large organization that influences hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people around the world. And she's asked to come to Dubai to be on the platform to share leadership principles with them. And so immediately upon the phone call, we scheduled a time. We sat down and talked over the phone for about an hour and a half. We wrote out the entire script. The next weekend was NRB here in Dallas. The National Religious Broadcasters. There were probably 6,000 people that showed up at that event. Everybody's working the crowds, finding their new media interviews, et cetera, et cetera. I'm taking care of my clients, doing some video reviews, et cetera. And she comes to me and she says, my plane leaves early in the morning, and I lost the notebook. The what? The notebook that has the entire speech that we wrote together on the phone. Wait, so you leave for Dubai tomorrow and you have no speech? She said, right. That's going to be a problem. Because I didn't record it either. We were on the phone, not on Zoom. There's no recording of it. There's no transcript. There's just what you wrote down. She said, so what am I going to do? I said, well, the first thing I'm going to challenge you in is your leadership role. Because I think perhaps losing the speech is the best thing to happen. She's like, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, we crafted a lot of those stories in there, but you were pretty adamant that you wanted to use the stories that you always use to fundraise. She goes, well, I'm going to be on the stage in front of these global leaders. Why would I not fundraise? I said, I want you to change your attitude for a moment. What if they didn't invite you because they thought, wow, she's got a great ministry. We need to know more about it so we can give more money to it. What if they invited you because they look at you with 3 decades of service, plus the 30 years almost in nursing as a nurse responsible for 500 surgeries a day? What if they looked at you and said, she's figured out something we don't know yet about how to serve people. And she's got a track record. And she's got a healthy service record. And she's made a great impact in people's lives. And we want to know, as young ministry leaders, how do we do that? And so we started over from the speech. Now, again, we've been working together about a dozen years. There were a lot of those stories that I recall in my head about what she does. And I challenged her and I said, what if we use this story to make this point? And what if we use this story over here? And she's like, oh, I haven't told that story in years. I said, I know. But I think it makes a great impact on the people who are going to be there, other leaders who are looking for an inspiration to lead differently. What if we alter the stories that you'd planned to tell and we write a different speech because we have a different attitude about that impact? So she packed her bags and she went to Dubai. And she selected an entirely different set of stories. So go back to your number one, the framework, the story selection. She selected the best story for leading the narrative of I am a leader who's made an impact for 3 decades, and you can too. For shaping the culture. How many of you work in an organization where it feels like the attitude of the culture is a little bit out of pace? It doesn't serve clients like it should. There are people who come to work with an attitude and you're like, really? Well, we got to get over that. We got to get past that. How do we reshape their attitudes? Well, you've got to select the right stories to tell to shape the attitude of the people you work around. You've got to instill transformational change. There are certain stories from your life, experiences that you've had that carry a whole lot of weight. And you may have thought, well, those stories don't seem that fascinating to me. They don't seem that entertaining to me. I was talking to someone just the other day. It was a female. I don't remember exactly who it was. But I said, that sometimes you catch a little scene and you realize I've been doing that wrong all my life. There's a guy who has a YouTube channel. He does these video shorts all the time. He's got a real Southern accent. And he says, are you kidding me? You telling me for 40 years I could have been doing it like this? I get a kick out of him every time. But it's ridiculous stuff like, instead of taking the Tupperware bowl and putting your cheesecake in the bottom and then trying to put the lid on and turn it over, just use the lid as a plate, put your cheesecake on it, and then snap the lid on the top. You're like, well, duh, but I would have never thought to do that until somebody else said, hey, you should do it like that. So when I'm talking to this person, I said, you know, there's a way to put the fan belt on the back of the pulley when you've got 3 other fan belts already on there. And this genius spent the majority of my life growing up around mechanics trying to figure out how to take off fan belt shroud, how to take off the fan blade, how to take off all these other pulleys, and finally get to the place in the back with nothing else in the way, so I got to put that one belt on. And then I saw this guy, this old farmer dude with a farm tractor, who stuck the belt all the way through and then rolled the wheels around until it wrapped itself around, and then he popped it up in the back, and I went, why come nobody ever told me that? I've been doing this wrong all my life. And see, when we talk about the stories that bring transformational change, selecting a story that seems to us so simple, but nobody else has ever heard it, especially if it's something we've had success at. We accidentally did it right once and we went, I'm going to make note of that. I'll never do it the other way again. That's valuable information for other people who maybe haven't discovered that on their own. So we've got to craft those stories. Well, we've got to select the right story to do it. Second, qualify those stories. How many of you have had customers that you really wanted to fire? Go ahead, raise your hand. I'll wait. Because I know you've all had that customer. You're like, now I love their money, but I hate their attitude. I love being able to get paid by them, but I do not like dealing with them, right? What if I told you there's a way through selecting the right stories, qualifying those stories well, and then crafting them just right, that when you're qualifying those stories, you have the opportunity to expose your core values and express opinions in a way that people go, you're exactly my kind of people. Or, we're not going to do well together. I've been like 5 minutes in and then I'm already tired of you. I know there are people who walk away after the first time meeting me going, wow, that guy is just way over the top. He's just way too intense for me. He talks too fast, like Russell Brunson or Caroline Lee. I can't do that. Right? Or, wow, his ideas are way out there. They don't align with mine at all. And you know what? In all honesty, I still love them, and I would still serve them if we could find common ground. But I have to be honest and say, I understand there are people that are not meant to be my clients. There's someone else who will serve them better. They'll get better results working with somebody else, and I'm okay with that. Trust me. After growing up on food stamps and potato soup, the only son of a single mom, being broke most of my life, having a bad attitude about money and a bad relationship with money, there was a season of my life that I would take every client that came to me, even if they abused me. I would take every client that came to me, even if they only wanted to pay me 1/3 of what I was worth. And for a long season of my life, I had no idea what I was worth. So I'd take 1/3 of that. Anybody else resonate with that? How many of you would like to be able to tell a story that in a matter of 2 or 3 minutes, you've laid out your core values and expressed some opinions that people go, you're my kind of people. Whatever it takes to work with you, I want to work with you. That's a powerful place to be in. That's the kind of relationship we want to build with people. And believe it or not, we don't have to spend oodles and gobs of money in marketing to do that. We just have to tell a story that makes it very clear to them who we are, what we expect, and how we deliver. Now, when crafting those stories, you have the opportunity to pick perfect people so that they will gain buy-in. They'll join in on the cause. The right people will make sacrificial investments, and other people will self-select and, well, frankly, they'll just go away. A lot of that comes in the very early part of selecting the right story. All of us have the long soap opera, novella, monologue type of a story. And if that's true, we also have tiny little learning moments, aha moments, where a new idea, a new revelation came to us. And rather than telling the whole story, we can tell that tiny part of a story. And that tiny part of a story causes people to go, I see that you have the skill set to help me. I know that you have the credentials and the credibility to change my life. You have what I'm looking for. We also know that these are people that we can engage with on a quid pro quo kind of a basis. They're willing to invest the time with us, the finances with us, to do business with us because they know what they're going to get in return is going to completely elevate their life, the quality of their life, their relationships in their life, their impact, their influence, and their income. That's what almost everyone wants. And when we suffer with hard relationships, it's because we're not clear about those expectations. Anybody else have relationships that are troubled because nobody was clear about what the expectations were up front. You can do that with a short story. You can qualify that relationship with a short story. If everybody's still with me, give me a thumbs up real quick just so I know we're all still good. I'm not putting anybody to sleep. Awesome. So what if I told you there's a way that we can engage for 6 weeks starting in January, and every week be able to come together, talk about the selection of stories, walk through that actual process. So you can take some stories and ideas and go, I want to work on this one. I really want to narrow this concept, this idea, this incident, this relationship down to something that it can be a podcast answer. It could be on the back of my brochure. It could be the thing that I say every time I get on the platform. I want a story that has that kind of power to use it every time. If that's something that's really of interest to you, then I think what we're going to start doing in January is really good. Now, I'd also like to know, how many of you are the IKEA kind of people? Here's what I mean by IKEA kind of people. You think to yourself, I would love to go buy a box that has a label on the outside and a packing slip and instructions on the inside, dump it out on the floor, and then work for the next several hours to figure out what it is and put it together. How many of you, that's you, the IKEA people? Do-it-yourselfers. Complete do-it-yourselfers. You show up at Home Depot with a flat cart and an equipment list, and you just make something out of it. How many of you are more like me? When I was 16 years old, I bought a 67 Chevy Impala. When I burned the clutch out of it, I pushed it up into the garage to change the clutch. My uncle lived about 6 hours away at the time and refused to come home to help me change the clutch. So myself and my 5'2" mother, picture me and Yoda underneath my car, trying to bench press the transmission. She's trying to hold it up, or I'm trying to hold it up, or she's trying to find the pilot bearing to put it back in there. And neither one of us have ever done this before. So I had my phone. Yeah, this is going to tell you how old we are. Before the days of the wireless phone in the house, we had the one with the long, stretchy cord, and we had to stretch it out and then put heavy things on it to keep it from curling back up and snatching the phone back to the phone. So we brought the receiver out, wedged it under the back tire of the car, and turned it up as loud as we could. And my mother and I, underneath that car with my uncle on the phone 6 hours away, were able to put the new clutch in that 67 Impala. Now, we did it wrong the first time. It lasted about 3 days and burned out the clutch again. We did it right the second time, and it lasted until I got rid of the car. But I couldn't have done that on my own. I didn't have the skill set. My mother didn't have the skill set, even though she had the willingness to get under there, get greasy, get dirty, get involved. But she couldn't help me through the process. How many of you have worked with a coach that when you're done working with them, you feel like you've made a great clone of yourself? But I'm not a better me having gone through that process. Anybody else? I've had those coaches that I've surrendered myself to and said, I'm going to give you the big money. I want you to, and when I'm done, I'm like, okay, well, I picked up a few things, but really all it means is I'm going to do exactly what you do. Now, there's some value in understanding when things work well that you repeat them because they work well. And then there's also something about a transferred skill set. Now, it's been many years since I replaced a clutch in a car. I'm not confident at this moment that I could do that because I've slept way too many times since then, been hit in the head way too many times since then. But I'm now more in that third class of people. It's not the complete DIY, do-it-yourself, IKEA people. I'm not in the just give me an expert over my shoulder phase as much anymore. I'm now in that place where I'm like, you know what? When the transmission goes out in my truck, I will save up the money to pay an expert to do it. I want to drop it off, and then I want to pick it up with a warranty. I want somebody else to be responsible for getting it all done. Now, I have a few clients that perceive me to be that complete do-it-for-me. They pay high amounts of money. We work on their entire book from cover to cover. We work on every media presentation. If they've got a podcast coming up, they know who the audience is, and we review everything they're going to answer and everything they're going to say, and I give them my spin on everything they're going to put out there in the media. But my average client is that one in the middle who says, you know what? I don't want to invest as much. I want to have my hands on. I want you to train me to have the same skill set and do it myself. And so that 6 weeks course that we've crafted is exactly that. You will have all the tools and all the resources. You'll have all the videos, the StoryPower Masterclass. You'll have access to that. You'll have the ability to go in and go, okay, when he says co-opted enthymeme, what in the world is that? People like Esther and Dawn have heard me teach on that. Tirza has heard me teach on that. And you might look at that and go, oh yeah, co-opted enthymeme, that's a complicated thing to get my hands on, but I want to hear that video several times. How do I go back to that tool and listen to it again, not just in week 2 of the training? And so you have access to that. You also have access to a weekly call for 6 weeks where we all get on and go, okay, this is the story I've been working on. These are the instructions you gave me. These are the tools that you told me to download, the scripts, the prompts, the fill in the forms that I can look at and go, okay, so if my story looks like this, what kind of expectations should I have? Is that going to connect emotionally? Should I be able to get the call to action done that I wanted to get done? Should I be able to change the culture in my workplace just by using this story? And if the answer is yes, then we bring it to the crowd and let everybody else give their feedback on it, because there's nothing better than a small group as a focus group to give you the feedback to say, that was powerful even in my life. And I want my stories to go to that next level. What did you do differently? That collaborative work is the most valuable thing you can ever find, in my opinion. Some call it a mastermind. I just call it group coaching, because I'll always be there to be a part of what you're doing and give you my input on it. I've been studying leadership communication for over 30 years and working to master these skill sets as a Dale Carnegie coach and a John Maxwell coach. I want to speak those things into your life. All right, so who is this for? One thing that I hear regularly from clients is, I'm afraid I'll forget what I have to say. Or, I have trouble with my words because I don't use many. Anybody met my wife, Karen? She does not use many words. She does not talk a lot at all. But I used to tell people, even in pre-marriage counseling, you need to understand that when Karen speaks, you should listen closely, because it's such a torturous thing for her to come up with all these words to share in public. That means it's burning a hole inside her. She's not going to speak until she can't not speak. So when those words come out, they should carry a lot of weight in your life. But if you're part of the StoryPower Masterclass, or you're part of this 6-week journey to boost your business through StoryPower, together we're going to focus on original, authentic, personal stories, because you seldom forget your own stories. We'll make sure that every word counts and no word salads are needed. How many of you feel like sometimes you're just filling time with word salad? I'm just talking and I don't really have anything important to say. Maybe you've met these people. Type me in the chat if this is true. There are a lot of people like Karen who really have something to say. They just don't say it very often. And then on the other side, there are those people who just have to say something. And they really don't have anything to say. They just won't stop talking. Anybody met them? So maybe this is for you if you say, I feel like we've tried everything to improve our company culture and our morale, but we still have a ton of room to grow. We just don't know how to create the change that we want to see. Now, if you've been in an organization any amount of time, you know that that's a challenge. You try as a leader to get people to move into that next level, and they just won't. So in this organization, in this particular group, we're going to work through what we call the attitude hack, and it demonstrates a really simple truth. Culture equals attitude. Attitude is engineered one story at a time and revealed in the everyday language of our leaders. StoryPower trains leaders to tell better stories better for lasting transformation in performance, culture, and customer reviews. How many of you would agree with my statement that brand is what people say about you when you walk out of the room? Give me a yes. Put a hand up. Anybody believe that statement? Brand is what they say about you when you walk out of the room. I mean, you can have the greatest color scheme. You can have the greatest logos. You can have the greatest brand statements, and even the story brand story. I don't disagree with anything Donald Miller says. I just think he stops at a very high level when there's a lot more granular work to do. That's what we do at StoryPower. The same is true of Grant Baldwin. I think Grant Baldwin does a great job getting people prepared to speech with creating their abstracts and creating their presentation pitch so that people know what you're going to talk about. What I haven't seen him do is really dial into, if I only have 2 minutes to talk, what do I say that makes people remember me? That's where my focus is. So that's a little bit different than your average bear that's out there teaching public speaking. How about this one? Maybe you've said or you've heard someone say, I've been through a lot and I don't know which stories are important to tell. Now, there are a lot of people who have a long and tragic testimony, and the challenge for them is when I start talking, I have a hard time shutting up. I spoke with someone the other day, and their entire chronological story, basically from their teenage years until yesterday, were part of that answer. And I said, you know, we've got to get to the place where you look across the room at the person that you're addressing, and what you say matters to them. Now, it's a little more challenging when that person across the room is not 1 but 20 or 200 or 2,000. That's a big deal. But I want you to have the skill set to be able to do that. And that skill set is going to come from practicing and rehearsing those stories again and again and again and again, and knowing, excuse me, sometimes what we have, that one's a different password, Karen. That's the Apple login password. Sorry, technical difficulties. Bear with me 1 second. You could have put something else on the screen so I could come back and do this. Thank you for your patience as we work out the glitches of our humanity. We are very, very human. When you have a long story, when you have that story that is the typical novel or novella, but you look across the audience and you realize everybody in the audience needs to hear what I have to say, and everybody in the audience is looking for some transformation, some inspiration, some motivation. The challenge we often wrestle with is, what sliver of that long testimony do I give them? Or is there a moment that I wouldn't have ever considered in my testimony, but in the manufacturing of this story, I see them? I remember my first international speech competition with Toastmasters. When I was preparing the speech for that, I had a 2-minute story called Daddy's Girl that I'd used several times. It always got great response, great emotional reaction. People would come up and hug me, and if my daughter was in the room, for heaven's sake, they always wanted to hug her and not me. But there were times that I would tell that story and teenage boys would just look at me like, are you for real? I mean, I don't even get it. And what I realized was the audience and the people in the story had no relationship to each other. And so I crafted another story where that group of teenage boys and young men who didn't have daughters could relate to the story. And when I tell that story, the teenage girls are like, that's so dumb. Why would they do that? But every dad with a son and every mother with a son and every son who's ever been 2 years old to 25 years old goes, dude, I was just like that. And I realized the story included the people who were in the audience. And so you can't just tell one story and expect everybody to get it. The reason for having all of these different stories is to understand some people have a different level of education. Some have a different level of maturity. Some are just different humans. And because those things are all true, we've got to resonate with each of them if we want to honor and respect and influence each of them. And so the reason that I tell my clients you must have 100 stories is that your one long story only has a limited number of people who can relate to every aspect of that long story. On the other hand, that collection of stories is a valuable thing for all kinds of people, because you can use one story to reach one audience and another story to reach another audience. And when you stack those together, you can blanket a large crowd of people and also be able to point right into the heart of one individual in that crowd when it's necessary. I get nervous when I don't know the people I'm speaking in front of, which causes me to stumble, stutter, or mess up my words. Anybody relate to that one? The StoryPower process empowers you with confidence in your message and delivery in front of any audience by restoring the confidence as the expert. Now, if you've ever been in a room and you feel like, of all the people in the room, I am the one that knows best what's going on here. Of all the people in the room, I'm the only one who's done X, Y, Z. I mean, I see 3 or 4 faces on here that don't look like people that I would say, hey, I'm going to bring you my car to change my oil. Not that I don't love you, not that I don't trust you, I just don't think that's your expertise. I'll give you a perfect example. When we moved to Granbury, we picked a little place to do our oil changes. On about the 5th change to get our oil changed, I parked there and I watch a guy come out and he's head all underneath my hood and screaming and yelling and cussing and just his little feet sticking up on the backside. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He said, I'm trying to get that stupid oil filter off. I said, well, why are you doing it from here? Everybody else does it from the bottom. And he stopped and he said, everybody else who? I said, well, this is the only place we've been to get our oil changed. I said, you seem a little frustrated with my answer. He said, oh, I'm very frustrated with your answer because what that means is they haven't actually been changing your oil filter. In this particular car, the only way to change your oil filter is from the top. You cannot access it from the bottom. I said, so what you're telling me is that I've been close to 100,000 miles without a new oil filter because the people who work here are not experts at oil changes. He said, well, this one's on the house. And I thought, well, that's great, but I sure want the expert in the room to be the one that's helping me. Well, if I tell you that story and you say, well, I need to get my oil changed while I'm in Granbury, I'm going to give you the guy's name and you're going to go, hey, is he here? Because if he's not here, nobody else is touching my car. Because that's the expert on this particular thing, for this particular car, for this particular model, in this particular time. When you know what you're doing around whatever it is that you do, the reason that you're taking the platform, picking up the mic, being the guest on the podcast, telling the story in front of the room, whatever the reason is for that, when you're the expert, you should build that into the stories that you tell. And here's what I find. I don't care if you're a 12-year-old boy who knows something about football or a 60-year-old man that knows how to put the belts on the inside of the pulley of your tractor. When you know what you're talking about, something in you changes. You ever listen to a teenage boy, you ask him tough questions about algebra, and you get this whisper of an answer. You ask them about their wrestling team, or their cows, or their truck, and you get these definitive, powerful, passionate answers. They know what they're talking about, or at least they think they do. But that level of confidence that comes with that supposed or at least presumed level of expertise changes the way we present. So if you're a little bit timid, get in front of a crowd, what we really want to do through StoryPower is bring alive your expertise in a way that other people look at you and go, man, I hear your passion. You must really love what you do. You must really be good at what you do. You must really get results for people in what you do. When all those things are true, it will come out through your stories with no effort at all. And that's a big deal. So that's something we really want to focus on in StoryPower. I freeze up when I put on the spot because I don't have anything prepared to speak about. Now, my client who had to go speak on the platform at the Global Leadership Summit in Dubai lost the entire presentation. But she wasn't without words. Because for the last 12 years, we've been crafting these stories. She had not, in her imagination, categorized them the same way that I did. She wouldn't have applied them the same way that I did. But a lot of that had to do with a leadership attitude. Am I here to raise money? Or am I here to raise the level of intellect and information for all of these leaders in the room based on my expertise and my experience? And so just that subtle mind shift from I'm coming to give, not I'm coming to ask, made her go back to the quiver of all the stories we'd worked on for the last 12 years and go, I'm not going to use that story, I'm going to use this one. I'm not going to use that story, but this one. And I'm going to put these two together with this transition so that when I get to the end, people have a stage or a framework to build through so they can apply all of these new ideas. I think that's a very valuable way to look at our stories. Again, not a monologue, not a soliloquy, not a novella, but a series of stories that teach the points that we want to make, knowing that when the audience changes, the story changes because that's how we relate that point to that audience. StoryPower method equips you to craft stories at a moment's notice from current events, for things you just learned or recently experienced in a matter of minutes so that you will have a quiver full of stories always ready to tell. Now, you'll hear my clients, the people that I work with one-on-one, I tell them all the same thing. When we're done, even if you only do a 90-day season with me, at the end of those 90 days, you will have the confidence that you could step out of the car, trip over a Coke bottle, and by the time you get to the door, you've got a new lesson to teach with a fascinating story to tell wrapped around that lesson. I want your skill set to be so quick, so polished, so accurate that you can jump out of the car and go, okay, I have a new idea. I have a new story. I know when I walk in the room and I look at that audience, I've already got something in my mind, now that I know who they are, that will lead to the conclusion I want to take them to. I can craft my call to action before I even show up because I know what I want them to do, and I already have the system in place for that to happen. Now all I have to do is connect them with my idea and give them a way to get there. Is that helpful? I spend too much time writing speeches. Anybody have that one? I spend too much time writing speeches? Whether it's the chapters of a book or it's a speech you're about to put on the platform. The StoryPower method helps gain back time by qualifying and categorizing your stories into teachable frameworks. You will use less time writing speeches, compiling trainings, and preparing for podcasts when you apply this method. Again, this is like my client who had to speak in Dubai, lost the entire speech, and over the course of dinner, again, you can ask Karen, she was sitting there, over the course of dinner, rewrote the entire speech and went and knocked it out of the park. In fact, she told me, she said, as soon as we're done with our big Christmas event in December, I've got to rewrite another speech because they've actually asked me to come to Chicago and speak at the live event of the core Global Leadership Summit with Craig Groeschel. And so I have to rewrite another presentation for that. And this is just one more level up. Again, that's a pretty big deal. Every time I have an opportunity, something inside me says I'm not capable, worthy. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. Look, everyone struggles with the imposter syndrome. Everyone. Like I told you when I started this webinar, this is probably going to be like the first kiss on a first date in middle school. It's going to be a mess. The technology, I've not written a webinar before. I don't know if I'm doing this right or not. Maybe we'll know at the end. But the reality is we all struggle with, I wish I was a little bit better. And the only way to get a little bit better is to practice. But StoryPower Academy trains leaders to select, qualify, and craft stories with courage, confidence, and competence built in. Why? Because we focus on your passions, we focus on your expertise, we focus on what you know that you know. You can confidently tell anybody in the world these things and have no question that they're going to be effective. I think this is the last. Who is this for? Karen gave me a hard time. She said, you got way too many of those. I've struggled all my life with confidence, low self-esteem, and self-sabotage. To me, my life looks like many failures. Again, this is full circle. This is back to my mom. The stories we repeat inside our head are often told in the worst light. StoryPower coaching process searches out these stories, rewrites them, and builds them into a powerful daily affirmations as well as effective communication tools for teaching. Now, if you've ever been asked to deliver your experience, maybe a testimonial with a client. Somebody says, hey, I served you, it worked out well, I'd like you to talk about it. And you feel like, I don't feel like I've accomplished anything. Oftentimes, we'll back off of the opportunity to share a testimony. We'll back off the opportunity to share an experience where someone else could learn from it and go, wow, I wish I had heard that before I invested. I wish I had heard that before I took the chance. I wish I had heard that. You mean I've been doing this wrong for 40 years? I mean, if you know the answer, why would you make me wait 40 years to learn that answer? That's just not fair. So if you've got that answer, your ability to step up and do that is valuable to other people. And sometimes you just got to get over yourself. But I can also tell you, a particular client showed up on one of our live StoryPower master classes. In those classes, we invite everybody to come to the front of the room and tell their story. Then they sit down and I say, I want you to start recording. As soon as you sit down, I'm going to tell your story back to you. But I'm going to use the StoryPower framework for your story. So they tell their story. They sit down. I tell their story. With her story, I only made 1 or 2 changes. Reorganized kind of how it was told, and then I changed one sentence completely. On the break, I find her in the hallway, tears just streaming down her face. And I'm like, is everything okay? And she said, you broke me. I said, what do you mean? She said, you changed my entire life when you changed my story. And I'm like, I didn't make that much change to your story. She said, no, you changed one thing. I said, okay, how's that such a big deal? She said, every time I've told that story, I said, when that woman walked in the room, I saw such hatred in her eyes. And what you said was, when that woman walked in, I felt such hatred in the room. She said, I had to ask the honest question, was that hatred hers or mine? And now I look back and I realize for 32 years I've shut that woman, my aunt, out of my life because I presumed the hatred was hers. And I have to be honest and ask, is there a chance that hatred was mine? And is that fair that she hasn't been a part of my life for all those years because I put the hatred on her that was really mine? And I've got apologies to make. Now, if you find yourself one of those, that the stories that you repeat inside your head about relationships, about past mistakes, about financial decisions you should have made but you didn't, it's really easy to find yourself in the prison of those things. And those things don't just stop you from succeeding, they stop you from helping people who desperately need you. How many of you would say, well, I would have run for office, or I would have been the manager of, or I would have led this organization, or I would have launched my nonprofit. And all of this time we don't, because there's a story in our head that says you're not good enough. You're not worthy. You're not qualified. You're not an expert. You've never succeeded at anything. Trust me, I've told all of those stories. And now, after having worked with hundreds of people and walked through those stories with them and hear them tell those stories and go, yeah, but this one little thing tells me that what you said in that story isn't true. You told me something about yourself the last time we talked that makes me look at this story and go, well, that's not true. And I can prove it. There's a deep value in taking the time to reassess and reevaluate the stories we're telling internally. And when we qualify those stories at the next level, they empower us to do more than we've ever imagined before. I love the way John Maxwell says it. You will not get out of life what you want. You'll get out of life what you become, the who that you are. And if you want to step on the platform, or you want to launch a podcast, or you want to write a book, or you want to lead a ministry, or you want to lead in politics, or if you want to educate from the front of the room or build online courses, all of those demand that you be honest with you, that you step up to the plate and go, I know who I was made to be, I know what I'm capable of, and now I can articulate that well. That's exactly what we do at StoryPower. If you're the do it with me type, if you're the I'm going to stretch the phone cord out and snatch it under the back tire of the car so that I can have an expert in my ear while I'm doing this work, this 6 weeks done with you course called Boost Your Business with StoryPower, I think it's what you're looking for. It's the opportunity to build these stories in a hands-on fashion. It's not, hey, here's the online course, go do it yourself. It's not an IKEA box of figure it out. It's a let's walk through this together kind of an opportunity. And if you found any value in what we've talked about today about selecting the stories, qualifying the stories, and crafting the stories from all the different perspectives that those apply, I think this is a program that's going to take you to the next level. Now, you can take a screenshot of that image that was on the screen, but I'm also going to tell you there is a really simple offer, and I'm going to give you a rundown. When you're a part of this course, what you're going to get is increased confidence when you're put on the spot to speak. You're going to get skills to tell stories which shape your legacy. You're going to get the emotional connection even in the toughest relationships. You're going to get the knowledge to rewrite the future of those that you lead. You're going to get credibility as an expert on your topic in any field. And you're going to get the power to identify, craft, and deliver compelling stories with authenticity and originality, not AI. You're also going to get the ability to flex as an impactful global thought leader. Tools at the ready to redefine your organizational culture, your brand, and your customer service. Again, all of these stories, they speak to attitude, they speak to culture, they speak to leadership, they speak to the direction that you're going to take your group, your ministry, your business in. Whether you're a political leader or a stay-at-home mom, the impact that you have has to do with the stories. How many of you have encountered a mom who has such bitterness in her heart for the way she was raised that it flows out into the conversation she has with her kids? or you've encountered someone who's doing everything they can to change the script because the way they were treated as a kid is not the way they want to treat their kids. All of this is about story power. So what's included? Well, 6 weeks of in-depth training based on decades of research and practice in the field of leadership communication. Downloadable exercises. These are tools for you to use through the duration of this course and beyond to select, qualify, and craft your stories for the greatest influence, impact, and income. Weekly group coaching calls facilitated by me personally, and weekly brief pre-call video lessons to learn and practice the principle ahead of time. Several opportunities to rehearse and polish your personal stories with me and with the group. Now, I know in the same way that my uncle being there on the cell phone, being there on the corded phone, answering questions for me when I said, okay, I'm trying to put this thing back in there and it's just not lining up. I didn't learn about a pilot bearing and a throw-out bearing and a clutch until I had a 400-pound transmission on my chest. I didn't have a clue. I didn't know that I didn't know. I didn't know what to ask until the expert was in the room going, you're not doing that right. Nothing I could have done would have discovered that. I didn't know to ask anybody, why isn't this thing going in there? And when he was able to describe over the phone, here's what you're doing wrong, here's how to fix it, it was life-changing. It took 4 hours of frustration and made it a 30-second solution. I don't know how many of you have tried to write a speech, tried to craft a speech, been on a podcast, felt like you bombed, and you're looking back at it going, I mean, if I just understood this one thing before that happened, I could have been so much better. That's what this 6 weeks journey is all about. Now, I know some of you are already involved in this. I know Esther has already made the decision to be a part of the course, and I really look forward to having you in there and having these discussions. I know Heather's going to be around with us the entire time as well. I am really excited for those of you who have already made the decision. What if the only thing this course did was help you to build confidence in your own skills and ability? What if this course repositioned your future career or education opportunities based on the beliefs in yourself? What if it gave you a significant advantage in presenting new ideas? What if it gave you tools to make the story mining a simple process? If you're a DIYer, we have courses for that. If you're pay the expert, I'm glad to engage with you. There's a higher price tag for that, but I think it'll be a great opportunity for you. But if you'd really like to get engaged right now in a course where we can walk through this with you together, I think $9.97 is a very fair price for 6 weeks worth of learning together. Comes out to basically $150 a week. Most people are going to spend that in Starbucks. You don't even have to spend it in gas because it's all virtual, it's all online, and you'll get the recordings and access to them again later. But what if I told you that today, if you're on this webinar, it's not $9.97. You ready for this? There's actually a QR code on your screen, and if Karen can figure out how to type it in the chat or copy and paste it in the chat, there's a link for you. And if you're not already signed up, instead of $9.97, it's only $3.97 today. And when you sign up for this course, you have a chance to participate in the entire 6 weeks. You'll have 6 months of access, only 6 months of access, because people have paid over $2,000 for a year's access to the StoryPower Basic, which is our StoryPower Masterclass online. What that means is at any point that you're like, what in the world is a co-opted enthymeme? Why are word pictures dangerous? What does he mean by learn to roar before I start to speak? Well, those are all classes that are embedded in the longer version, part of the mastermind, part of the elite program, but they're accessible to you for 6 months from the day that we start the 6 weeks course, so that you have this supplemental training to go back to and go, okay, that sounds like a great idea, but I didn't fully get it. Dive into it, watch the videos, ask the questions, fill out the homework, and come back and go, okay, I watched that video on Learn to Roar, I've tried to apply it to my story, I still don't get it. Well, we got a supplemental video for the week based on the homework that we're going to do. You got the downloads, then you got the Q&A call with me. I'm going to block off 2 hours for each one of those calls. So each week we'll walk through what we did in the training, and then I'll be there to answer your questions and give you feedback and give you a review, and probably even take the time. Some of you have seen what I call the magic formula, where you tell your story and I tell it back to you. We'll be doing that on some of those Q&A calls. So you'll actually get to hear your story from my point of view, from my framework, from my expertise, so that you can apply that. And yes, They will be recorded. So you can go back and look at that script and go, I like the way you did that. I want to change mine to be more like that. You're welcome to use those any way you can. It's your story, just told through my point of view. So if those things sound like they're of value to you, I would love for you to be in. I'm going to walk over here for a second and add, can you put that QR code back up for a second? I'm going to open the chat because I can't see it from where I'm at. I'm too old. I can't see the chat. I have to go full screen on the chat. Not an IKEA person, me. Okay, word salad here. See if I can make these work together. Because when I put this chat up, it hides my people. That's what happens when you're logged into the wrong kind of device. Michelle Evans, I thought that was you. My eyes are too old to see everybody's face from that distance. That's the wrong link, Karen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it should be in your phone. Let me send it to you real quick.
Well, I can't get it into there from my phone.
Okay. How many of you can open that QR code from where it's at? Can you see it well enough to do that from your phones? Let me ask this. While I can see the chat open, before I go to a whole lot of trouble, how many of you want the link for the $3.97 to join? Just say me in the chat and we'll message you directly if we need to, but I know that I have it saved in my phone. I just have to get to it. Hey, look there. Okay, Karen, paste in the chat. Just open chat and paste. Esther, we're looking forward to working with you too. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to turn your mic on so that I can hear you and ask any questions you like. Katie, thank you for being here. Look forward to having you in the class as well. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. That's not it, Karen. I understand. What? Pasted wasn't the right thing? Should be this. Try one more time.
It's the same thing.
Hey, J. Loren, what time will the calls be?
7 p.m. on Tuesdays. That's 7 p.m. Central Time, Michelle. I know that's going to be a different time for you. Okay, Karen, I'm going to open the notes on that device. And there's a new note that I started there.
It's the same thing.
Please. Now there should be something added. Just refresh it. It'll say checkout. No other questions? She is trying one more time to paste that in there. I saw several people on social media that it is on the social media site. It shouldn't have been the same thing. Karen just says, should say checkout at Square. All right. Well, I've taken up 90 minutes of your time. I don't see anybody jumping up and down to ask questions. So if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them. And I will hang around for a few more minutes to do that as we get the technology up there. If you're on this call and you would like to take advantage of that offer and you have not yet, then please let me know and we will send you the information that's necessary to do that via text, et cetera, et cetera. But short of any questions, I'm going to give about 2 more minutes. And if you don't have any specific questions on that, then I will say to you, thank you for being a part of it. Thanks for being a part of the webinar, and have a blessed day.